Hello, you're watching Eye on Africa. I'm James Creedon. Here are our headlines from across the continent this evening. In Burundi, thousands gathered to say their final farewell to President Pierre Nkurunziza. He passed away at 55 years of age on the 8th of June. We'll bring you footage of today's state funeral. And in Madagascar, celebrations took place to mark 60 years of independence. We'll get a flavour of those festivities in the capital, and we'll take a look back at the rocky road to winning independence from France. And a good day's work for one Tanzanian miner who discovered two huge Tanzanite rocks. The precious stones have now made him a millionaire. We'll bring you more on that later on in the show. Thanks for watching. I will start this bulletin in Burundi, where it's been a tricky few weeks of transitioning after the sudden death by heart attack of Pierre Nkurunziza. The president was due to leave office anyway in August after elections had seen his hand-picked successor Evariste Ndayishimiye voted in. And while he was often a divisive figure, thousands did gather in the streets of Gitega to say a final goodbye to Nkurunziza. Laurent Bersticker has more.
A final parade for Pierre Nkurunziza. Wrapped in the Burundian flag and flanked by soldiers, the former president's coffin was displayed one last time inside Ingoma Stadium, where thousands of mourners, ministers, clergy members and civilians had gathered to bid him farewell. His successor, President Evariste Ndayishimiye, also paid tribute to the man he saw as a mentor. Pierre Nkurunziza, whose death earlier this month took the country by surprise, had been ruling over Burundi since 2005. Over the years, the self-proclaimed supreme guide and father of the nation had become a larger-than-life figure for many Burundians. Nkurunziza's cult of personality intensified after the 2015 political crisis, which was sparked by his decision to run for a third consecutive term. A devout evangelical, he had refused to implement strict sanitary measures against the COVID-19 pandemic, claiming Burundi was under divine protection. Nkurunziza passed away on June 8th at the age of 55.
To Madagascar next, where the 26th of June 1960 marked the end of France's rule in the island nation. And today, that milestone was marked with a military parade in Antananarivo. President Ange Razoel inspected that parade in a Cadillac used by the first president post-independence. But celebrations were restricted due to the pandemic. Some 250 heads of diplomatic missions, ethnic groups, institutions, as well as government ministries were in attendance, but most Malagasy were advised to follow events on their TV screens. Let's take a look back now at what was a bloody and tumultuous road to independence. This report by Nicolas Germain and Erin Ogonke.
A look back at French news reports in the 1960s gives the impression that Madagascar's push for independence played out peacefully.
Au stade Massina, le président Tsiran avait remis son premier drapeau au détachement de la nouvelle armée malgache qui allait défiler devant 100 000 spectateurs. Ainsi est né un nouvel État de 592 000 km² et de près de 6 millions d'habitants.
But in reality, the path to the country's autonomy was among the bloodiest of all of France's former colonies. In 1896, the then Marina Kingdom became a part of the French colonial empire, which implemented a system of forced labor. The Malagasy uprising began some 50 years later, in March of 1947. Malagasy nationalists attacked both Europeans and locals accused of cooperating with colonizers, leaving hundreds dead. The French crackdown was brutal. That year, 30,000 additional troops were sent to the island, engaging in extrajudicial killings, torture, and burning villages. The French military even threw suspects from flying planes to terrorize the population. Historians estimate that tens of thousands of Malagasy civilians were killed. In these images, rebels are forced to hand themselves over to French authorities. In 1958, 11 years after the rebellion, the colony held a constitutional referendum. While most of the residents in the capital voted against independence, more than 77% of the population, mostly in rural areas, voted in favor. The vote took effect on June 26, 1960, restoring the former kingdom's independence.
In Ivory Coast, at least 7 people have died in flash floods that hit Abidjan in the past few days. Torrential rains have pummeled down on the city with further heavy rainfall expected this weekend. Some major thoroughfares in the city are just above sea level. Cars and debris were swept away in some zones. The West African nation's April to October rainy season can frequently cause floods and landslides. Morocco has almost entirely come out of lockdown with the exception of Marrakesh and Tangiers. Shops and leisure centres have reopened in most of the country, but places of worship and nightclubs are still shut, and large gatherings such as weddings and funerals remain forbidden. Moroccans still have to wear face masks as a compulsory measure across the country. This report by Jean-Marie Lemaire, Nina Kalowski and Josh Vardy.
Morocco finally starts to open up. 3 months after announcing a state of emergency, the kingdom has accelerated plans to leave lockdown and take the first steps towards reviving the economy. Mass testing of employees in the private sector has become a priority, an initiative organised by the Health Ministry alongside the workforce.
De un, c'est bien sûr pour répondre aux instructions de Sa Majesté le Roi. De deux, pour prouver aussi que les entreprises privées qui ont continué leur activité ne sont pas des foyers de contamination, ne sont pas des entreprises où on trouve des cas, parce que au final, si on applique toutes les mesures nécessaires, on n'a pas lieu à avoir des cas.
The hospitality sector is also desperate to return to business. If they have been authorised to open, restaurants will, however, have to follow a strict set of guidelines and take around half their usual customers.
3 mois et demi sans activité, ça va de soi que c'est un gros coût économique. On a beaucoup de charges fixes, on a du personnel qui a besoin de reprendre un travail, une activité économique également, c'est des familles. Et donc oui, c'était assez lourd et on est en tout cas très soulagé de pouvoir retravailler.
The transport sector is also breathing a sigh of relief, with airports keen to show they're ready to return to the skies. But only domestic flights will be allowed at first.
Étant donné que nous traitons pratiquement 65% du trafic qui vient de l'Europe, donc nous restons dépendants évidemment de la reprise des autres pays et de la réouverture évidemment des frontières, particulièrement entre les pays européens et le Maroc.
The slow return to a degree of normality is a big relief for the country. The lockdown was estimated to have cost Morocco around 91 million euros a day. But like elsewhere, the country still expects to suffer a severe economic backlash.
To Mali next, where the centre of the country has been plagued by jihadist violence and inter-ethnic conflict, leaving 580 people dead this year alone. Now, clashes between the Pul, also called Fulani, and Dogon communities have increased in recent months, with community-based militias initially formed to defend their communities, now often launching attacks. The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, has spoken out against what she calls widespread impunity that is undermining attempts to protect civilians. Let's take a listen to her spokesperson.
The High Commissioner, Michelle Bachelet, has said the vicious cycle of retaliatory attacks between Dogon and Pearl militias, coupled with the violations and abuses committed by Malian defence and security forces and armed groups, has created a situation of chronic insecurity for the civilian population, who were not able to count on the protection of the Malian forces. This needs to stop. The High Commissioner is calling on the Malian authorities to establish prompt, thorough, impartial and independent investigations into all alleged human rights violations and abuses, and to ensure proper accountability processes are established.
Now, a small-scale miner in Tanzania has become an overnight millionaire and celebrity after uncovering 2 enormous Tanzanite stones. He then sold them to the government. The country's mining minister announced the gems were the largest ever found in the country, earning the man who found them a cool €2.9 million. Alexander Okot has the story.
A cheque for close to €3 million signed by the Bank of Tanzania, making Saninu Liza a record breaker and a very wealthy man. The 2 massive chunks of Tanzanite are the biggest ever found, and the small-scale miner says he'll use the money to build a new shopping centre and a school.
Nashukuru sana serikali kwa haya yote tulioyaona kwa sababu imetupa motisha mkubwa sana. Nimejenga madarasa mawili mwaka iliyopita kwa ajili ya watoto wa shule, sio shule yangu lakini.
The precious stones can only be found in the country they're named after. When cut and polished, they shine a variety of blue and violet, making them highly sought after for jewelry. But these two nuggets weighing 5 and 9 kilos may be too heavy to wear around your neck. They were discovered in the Mirani Mountains near Mount Kilimanjaro, an area that's been under protection for the past 2 years to prevent illegal export of Tanzanite. For the government, rewarding Saninyu is also a way of promoting the legal exploitation of the gems.
Leo Liza amechimba kwa muda mrefu. Ametukusanya wote hapa. We all.
It's a very precious discovery indeed. The government says the stones will be placed in the National Museum, but by some estimations they could be worth 20 times what Saninyu was paid.
All right, that brings us to the end of this edition of Eye on Africa. Thanks for watching.